Question number 5, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the whole House knows, the path to lower interest rates is through low inflation, which is why the government is fully committed to supporting the Bank of England to get inflation back down to its 2% target. Now, where mortgage borrowers do fall into financial difficulty, our mortgage charter, which covers about 90% of the market, includes new flexibilities to help customers manage their repayments on top of the FCA's rules on how lenders must treat borrowers.
Lawrence Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for that response. Given that a lot of mortgage payers are suffering because of the very rapid hike in interest rates, will the government continue to talk to the Bank of England and to mortgage lenders to see what can be done to bring interest rates down, which really would help most people?
I thank my honourable friend for his point, and I completely agree with him of the absolute need to drive interest rates, mortgage rates down. That's why we're supporting the Bank of England in their independent remit to bring it down, but also we're making sure that we don't do things that make inflation worse, such as, to pick one thing, for example, Mr. Speaker, adding £28 billion to the government borrowing, which would increase inflation.
Marion Fellows.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The rate for a 2-year fixed mortgage remains over double the level it was in December 21. Over 900,000 borrowers are set to see their monthly payments rise by £500 or even £1,000 a month, with government ministers having to resign because of increases in mortgage payments. How does the Chancellor expect Scotland and people in Scotland to cope with the increased mortgage rates if his government ministers can't?
I thank the honourable lady for her question. I'd say two things in response. The first is the best thing we can do is to try and help people with the cost of living and not increase their taxes, which is the proposal of the SNP in Scotland, but also to maintain, well, I'm not going to get bored of saying this, Mr. Speaker, to maintain our support for the Bank of England driving inflation down. We've more than halved it. We will continue to do that. And when we do that, interest rates will come right down.
Question number 10, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mortgage interest rates have now fallen by over 100 basis points from their peak in the summer. Nonetheless, the government has prioritised supporting households vulnerable to cost of living pressures. This government has introduced one of Europe's largest support packages, and it is in part thanks to these measures that real incomes have proven more resilient than anticipated. In Q3 2023, real household disposable income per person was just 0.5% lower than in Q4 2019 versus the OBR Autumn Statement 2023 forecast that it would be almost 3% lower.
I thank the Minister for his answer, but since his party's disastrous mini-budget fiasco under the last Prime Minister, food prices have soared, we've seen extreme damage to the economy and mortgages skyrocket. Every month, 200,000 people are having to remortgage, and the average rate has gone up by £240, and 1.6 million people will have to remortgage this year. And overall, 14 years after the Conservative government, people are over £10,000 less well off than they were in the pre-2010 trends. Isn't it time the Chancellor looked again at the additional support with ministers to support those that are facing mortgage and financial distress? The Chancellor's frowning, but it's time he took further action to support people in distress.
I thank the honourable lady for her question, and I'd respond in this way. This government has introduced one of Europe's largest support packages, worth over £100 billion over 2022 to 2025, and which is an average of £3,700 per household. In relation to mortgage rates, the point is this: they went up everywhere across the world, mortgage rates, in fact higher in many jurisdictions than in this country, such as the United States. I've already talked about earlier in this session about the work that we've done on the mortgage charter, supporting thousands, hundreds of thousands of people managing their mortgages. But the critical thing that we need to do is to bring inflation down. And she needs to talk to her Shadow Chancellor and the Shadow Treasury team about their plans that will make inflation higher.
Question number 14, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's taking ambitious steps to grow the UK's world-leading financial services sector with widespread industry support. To take one example, reforms to Solvency II will help spur a vibrant, innovative and internationally competitive insurance sector. They will unlock £100 billion for productive investment to grow the UK economy over the next 10 years in all the constituencies in this House.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for that answer. But clearly, to grow the financial services industry, investors must have confidence that actually their money is going to be safe. Now, he will know that I've written to him about the Woodford equity scandal, which there are many thousands of victims across this country. The FCA refused to intervene. Will he now intervene and take action to ensure that the investors get at least a large part of their money back?
I thank my honourable friend for his question and also for writing to me and standing up for the rights of his constituents. It's important the House knows that investors have voted to accept the scheme. Over 90% of investors voted to do so, the scheme of arrangement. It is now up to the court to decide whether to approve it or not, and therefore I won't comment on it any further, but I'm happy to be in constant dialogue with him on that matter, as many others.
Speaker, I thank the Minister for that response. Minister, as the Minister will know today, the Northern Ireland Assembly sits for the first time to make a change for Northern Ireland. We would very much like to be part of the financial services sector. So can I ask the Minister, what can the Minister do and Government do to support the Northern Ireland Assembly with the financial services sector and ensure that we in Northern Ireland can be part of this great country, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, always better together?
I echo his sentiments very strongly, and what I could say to him is that I'm very happy to engage with him and his colleagues from Northern Ireland to see what more I can do with the Treasury to work with him and indeed the Northern Ireland Executive, but in particular to encourage our financial services institutions to invest more in Northern Ireland than they do currently. I'm very happy to discuss ways in which we can do that.
Last July, following the debanking scandal, I wrote to the Economic Secretary about the risks of implementing so-called diversity, equity and inclusion policies. Far from being inclusive, this implementation has often been very divisive. Yet the Labour opposition put such policies at the heart of their financing growth strategy just last week. So will my right honourable friend assure us that he will give clear direction to the PRA and the FCA to avoid all the risks of so-called DEI policies?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. What I will say is that I'm studying those carefully. I am concerned about certain aspects of what is proposed, but indeed I'll be discussing that with the PRA and the FCA to make sure that we have sensible policies going forward on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the autumn statement, the Chancellor announced he would explore selling off the government's remaining stake in NatWest this year. As it stands, does he anticipate this will result in a better or worse return for taxpayers compared to the previous sales?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. Indeed, the Chancellor announced at the autumn statement last year that the government will, over the next 12 months, consider selling shares in NatWest. That is all subject to value for money concerns and other matters, which of course he'll appreciate, and indeed it is market sensitive. But of course, we will consider value for money at the heart of any sale of shares, and the House will be kept fully informed over the coming weeks and months.